Have you ever noticed how the atmosphere changes when you enter a place? Conversations dwindle, glances shift, smiles become somewhat tense, and no one explains why. But there is a reason, and it has nothing to do with antipathy. Carl Jung would say that your presence speaks before your words, that your aura carries something that the collective unconscious recognizes: truth. And truth is frightening. The world has learned to protect itself from those who are authentic. People say they want light, but they shrink when it shows its own shadow. That's why those who carry an awakened energy are mistaken for someone too intense, strange, or difficult to read. But what if the problem was never you? What if what makes you avoided is the same thing that makes you rare? Because when the soul awakens, the body no longer fits into old roles. Presence becomes a mirror, and mirrors are not welcome in a world of masks. That's why many distance themselves. They're not running away from you, they're running away from themselves. Jung said that every soul that confronts its shadow becomes a kind of living reminder of who others could be if they had the courage to look inside. And that courage is what your aura transmits without needing a word. This video isn't about changing who you are. It's about understanding why the world reacts the way it does to your presence. You'll discover the invisible signs that reveal the spiritual strength you carry and why it provokes so much fear, fascination, and confusion. Because in the end, those who awaken stop seeking acceptance. They begin to seek truth. And those who live in truth inevitably become dangerous to what is false. There are people who don't need to speak to be heard. They enter a room and something invisible moves. A slight tension in the air, a silence that settles, a glance that turns. It's not a mystery, it's psychic energy. The invisible field that Carl Jung called the living expression of the self. When someone begins to live authentically, this force changes the frequency of everything around them. It's as if the collective unconscious recognizes the presence of something awakened. Have you noticed that some people seem to light up a room just by existing? It's not charm, it's inner coherence. The aura of someone who lives in truth carries spiritual weight. And it's not a weight that oppresses, but one that sustains. It's the same kind of magnetism we feel before someone who has crossed their own shadow and returned whole. This energy needs no introduction, no explanation. It simply is. And that's precisely why it bothers those who live on appearances, because the false doesn't know how to deal with the true. The disguise crumbles before the authentic presence. The curious thing is that most people don't understand why they feel different around someone like that. It's as if something within them begins to reorganize itself, as if a forgotten truth wants to emerge. Carl Jung said that the awakened soul provokes discomfort in the unconscious because its aura acts as a mirror. It reflects not only light, but also everything that the other person tries to hide. It is the silent gaze that reveals lies, the calm tone that betrays intentions. When a person reaches a state of individuation, the environment reacts, like the sea reacts to the wind. It changes direction. And you don't need to talk about spirituality to understand this. Just remember how we feel in the presence of someone who is truly present. A friend who truly listens, a teacher who speaks with soul, a stranger who looks at you without fear. They all share this same quality, authenticity, as a vibrational force. And it is this that changes the atmosphere of a room, that makes the laughter of others cease, that transforms the invisible into a palpable sensation. Want to perceive this power within yourself? Try entering a place and observing the effect of your calmness. Remain silent, but stay alert. Notice who is restless, who approaches, who moves away. This is the non-verbal language of the soul, the dialogue between your aura and the collective unconscious. And the more you know yourself, the stronger this presence becomes. That's why Jung stated, "What you resist persists." because everything that is repressed continues to ask to be seen, and when someone finally sees it, the field changes. The presence that transforms the environment doesn't arise from trying to impress, but from the act of being whole. The self, when in harmony, reorganizes the energy around it. That's why some people are unsettling without opening their mouths. Because their mere existence is a living reminder that truth still exists, and that is enough to awaken or disturb the world. People often confuse depth with heaviness and authenticity with drama. When someone speaks with presence, with that intensity that comes from the soul, the superficial world feels threatened. Carl Jung explained that the energy of the self is like an underground current, silent but impossible to contain. That's why those who live connected to their own spirituality can no longer remain in empty conversations, automatic gestures, rehearsed relationships. There's something in their aura that bothers them, that seems to demand an honesty from others that they are not ready to offer. When you speak, even without raising your voice, you awaken old echoes in others, memories, pains, doubts. And then they say, "You are too intense." They don't realize that it's not intensity, it's clarity. What is frightening is not the fire, but the reflection it casts on what was hidden. Intensity is not something one chooses. It becomes inevitable when consciousness awakens. It is the natural consequence of having looked at one's own shadow and survived it. People who have experienced inner exploration carry in their gaze a wisdom that cannot be taught in books, although Jung and so many others have tried to translate this phenomenon into words. It is the gaze of someone who has crossed the desert and learned to befriend silence. Therefore, when someone genuinely awakened speaks, the collective unconscious reacts as if an ancient truth has been remembered, and unable to deal with what is real, the superficial flees. It is easier to judge the profound than to admit one's own spiritual anesthesia. It is easier to call too much someone who makes you feel what you would rather not feel. But those who understand the game realize that this reaction is a disguised compliment. It is a sign that their presence touches the invisible. If you've ever felt rejected for being intense, remember that light always bothers those accustomed to darkness. Intensity is simply the result of a soul in combustion, and that flame is what separates the awakened from the asleep. The secret is not to dim the brightness, but to learn how to direct it. Use that force to create, to serve, to teach. Write, paint, speak, listen, all with truth. Authenticity is the bridge between the invisible and the human. Carl Jung said that those who integrate the collective unconscious bring to the surface what many fear to confront. So, when someone feels uncomfortable around you, don't take it as rejection, but as confirmation. Your intensity is living proof that you've stopped living on the fringes of consciousness. And perhaps, without realizing it, you're already teaching others what it means to be real. There comes a point in the journey when the trivial becomes unbearable, not out of arrogance, but because the spirit begins to thirst for depth. Carl Jung said that when the self awakens, the soul begins to reject everything inauthentic, from banal conversations to relationships based on appearances. It's an almost physical process. Energy drops, the body stiffens, the gaze wanders. You try to participate, you try to smile, but something inside screams, "This has no life." It's the aura reacting to the dissonance between truth and mask. Those who live in tune with the collective unconscious feel when they are in a superficial environment. It's like breathing rarefied air, and this is not isolation, it's discernment. Spiritual awakening doesn't make you unpleasant, just more selective about what feeds your consciousness. Because the soul can no longer tolerate crumbs of truth. It yearns for real connections, dialogues that tear through the silence, encounters that leave marks. The curious thing is that by rejecting superficiality, the individual begins to realize how much society has been built to keep people distracted. Small talk to avoid big truths, mechanical smiles to mask emptiness. Jung stated that the ego fears silence because it is in silence that the shadow speaks. That's why most people avoid pauses, and those who don't are seen as strange. But those who have listened to their own soul know that this discomfort is only the beginning of transformation. When authenticity begins to guide choices, the energy field changes. The aura becomes clearer, the gaze more present, the speech more precise. You stop responding automatically, and this confuses others. Some will say you are distant, when in reality you have simply learned not to be distracted. Because there is no possible spiritual growth on the surface of existence. So, what to do when the world seems too shallow? Turn inward. Nourish depth with silence, reading, and practice. Read Jung, yes, but also listen to what he would make you seek, your own experience. Meditate by observing your own thoughts. Write your truths in a notebook. Walk alone and notice what emerges in the void. Individuation doesn't happen amidst noise. It demands listening. And the more you learn to sustain this stillness, the more authenticity becomes natural. The rejection of superficiality is, at its core, the compass of the self pointing home. And it is in this stillness that you begin to feel something new, an invisible, almost magnetic force about to reveal what lies beneath human masks. Every soul that has faced its own shadow carries, even without realizing it, the archetype of the wounded healer. Carl Jung described this as a sacred mark, the ability to understand the pain of others because one has bled inside. Those who have traversed emotional chaos develop an aura that transmits calm, an energetic field where people feel they can shed their defenses. And that's why, unintentionally, you attract confessions, tears, and outpourings. It's the collective unconscious recognizing in you a safe mirror. The energy of someone who has cried inside has a different frequency. It doesn't judge, it doesn't interrupt, it only welcomes. But this same gift comes with an invisible weight. The loneliness of someone who is rarely asked, "And you, how are you?" The wounded healer carries the gift of listening, but doesn't always find someone to listen. And it is in this absence of reciprocity that their greatest spiritual test is born, learning to nourish themselves while healing the world. True spirituality isn't found on altars, but in the silent daily life of those who offer peace without expecting applause. Jung said that the true healer isn't the one who heals everyone, but the one who accepts their own wounds as part of the journey. Because it's this authenticity that empowers presence. Authentic people don't heal with words, they heal with coherence. When you live in individuation, that is, aligned with yourself, the energy changes. Your simple company becomes therapeutic. A friend feels relief just by being near. A colleague opens up without understanding why. A stranger tells you their life story in a coffee shop queue. This happens because the aura of those who integrate the shadow vibrates with truth. But the danger lies in forgetting oneself, in trying to save everyone while exhausting oneself. The wounded healer needs to remember that boundless compassion transforms into self-destruction. To balance this energy, it's necessary to develop the same empathy you offer, but directed inward. Take time for yourself and don't feel guilty about it. Practice what Jung would call inner dialogue. Write letters to your own pain. Listen to them. Treat them as you would a dear friend. Make silence a remedy and authenticity your prayer. And when you feel the weariness of your soul, remember, the healer also needs to heal their own fire. Meditate, walk in nature, listen to music that calms the body and awakens the soul. Each act of self-care reinforces your aura and returns you to the center of the self. The archetype of the wounded healer is not a curse. It's a reminder. You can only guide others to the depth you have dared to dive into. And perhaps it is precisely in this dive that the gaze begins to become a mirror, the next step in the journey that awakens the invisible in others. Few things reveal as much as the gaze. It is through the eyes that the unconscious speaks without asking permission, and that is why some eyes frighten, not for what they show, but for what they see. Carl Jung said that the soul recognizes the soul, and that is why eye contact between two authentic beings can be so disarming. When someone with an awakened aura truly looks, the other feels seen in places they didn't even know existed. The shadow becomes restless, the ego tries to protect itself, and that subtle discomfort arises. A quick, averted gaze, a nervous laugh, a comment to break the silence. It's not fear of the person, it's fear of the mirror. Because those who have gone through the individuation process carry in their gaze the memory of everything that has been denied. And this gaze doesn't pretend, doesn't soften, doesn't disguise. It simply reflects what is. That's why some avoid you, others challenge you, and few support you. Authenticity, when seen in the eyes, becomes almost a psychic force. Some believe that the gaze is merely a facial expression, but in reality, it's a direct channel between the self and the collective unconscious. What vibrates within escapes through the eyes. A fragmented mind transmits confusion. A peaceful soul radiates presence. This is why certain people possess a silent magnetism, something that attracts, calms, and unsettles simultaneously. When Jung studied transference and projection, he spoke of this phenomenon, the gaze that awakens dormant contents in the other. It's not a gift, it's the result of integration. When you look at someone with presence, that person's unconscious feels the call to awaken. It's a type of communication that dispenses with words, as if auras exchanged information outside of time. The conscious gaze is almost a prayer, and no lie can withstand it. Those who live behind masks perceive, even unconsciously, that they are facing something they cannot deceive. But the healing gaze also needs to learn to rest. The danger of seeing too much is forgetting to close your eyes from time to time. Not everything should be revealed. Not every truth should be told. Jung said that wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to be silent, and this also applies to the gaze. There are moments when the silence of the eyes is the greatest act of compassion. Therefore, those who have this spiritual sensitivity need to practice balance, looking at the other without getting lost in them, seeing the other's shadow without absorbing it. A good way to train this is conscious observation, looking at a person and noticing what they feel, but then taking a deep breath and returning the energy to the center of the self. This practice reinforces your aura and keeps authenticity alive without overwhelming you. The gaze is a portal, yes, but also a mirror. And when the mirror learns to reflect without carrying, the presence that awakens the unconscious is born. The prelude to the force that transforms the surrounding field. Some presences don't go unnoticed, they awaken. Not because they speak loudly, but because they vibrate at a high frequency. Carl Jung stated that the collective unconscious reacts instinctively to the energy of those who have already crossed their own shadow. When someone walks in coherence with the self, the simple fact of existing becomes a mirror for their surroundings. People may not understand why, but they feel it. They feel discomfort, fascination, or a strange mixture of both. It's as if something within them begins to move, to reorganize itself without warning. The aura of someone who lives authentically is a living reminder of everything the other person hasn't yet had the courage to face. That's why sometimes you arrive and the atmosphere changes. Laughter ceases, glances shift, words are lost. Your presence unintentionally touches the unconscious of those who are still asleep. And what is unconscious, when touched, reacts. This reaction can come in the form of irritation, judgment, or even excessive admiration. Some will feel inspired, others attacked, and few will understand that what truly affects them is not you, but the reflection you project. Jung said that what bothers us in others is in fact a shadow that we have not yet accepted in ourselves. Therefore, when your energy is whole, the world around you divides. Those who seek light approach, those who fear the truth move away. It's not personal, it's psychic. It's the collective unconscious trying to protect itself from the mirror. And you need to recognize this so you don't get confused. When you feel someone is avoiding you, breathe and observe. Don't try to please or withdraw. Just maintain the field. The role of those who carry consciousness is to remind others of what they have forgotten to be. And however lonely this may seem, this is how the individuation process fulfills its purpose, silently transforming the environment through presence. Maintaining this awakened energy requires spiritual preparation. Therefore, it is essential to take care of your vibration. Avoid environments where falsehood reigns, not because you are better, but because the self needs clean spaces to breathe. Walking among sleeping consciousnesses without becoming contaminated is an art, and it is learned over time. Meditate daily, even if only for 5 minutes, just to remember who you are. Use your breath as an anchor. Visualize your aura expanding and returning to the center. This is not mysticism, it is energetic hygiene. Jung saw spirituality not as escape, but as integration, the spirit rooting itself in matter. When you understand this, you realize that your presence is not a burden, but a calling, a silent invitation for the world to awaken. And it is precisely this force, this vibration that disturbs sleeping egos that will begin to reveal something even deeper. The power of clarity that destabilizes everything that is false. Truth has a brilliance that blinds eyes accustomed to twilight. When someone achieves inner clarity, this light begins to overflow in every gesture, word, and silence. Carl Jung said that individuation is not a state of perfection, but the result of a radical confrontation with the shadow. Those who have gone through this process radiate a kind of calm that is unsettling, a confidence that dismantles what is fragile. The presence of these people does not impose, it exposes. They don't need to point out errors, because the simple fact of existing authentically makes the ego of others waver. The world is accustomed to masks, not transparency. And when someone emerges without disguises, the collective unconscious reacts like someone facing the sun after years in caves. The clarity of an awakened being is not arrogance. It is a consequence of those who have freed themselves from illusions. Therefore, it needs no defense. It simply needs to shine. But this brilliance doesn't come without a cost. Being lucid in a world that feeds on deception means living in constant tension between understanding and loneliness. Jung stated that the ego fears dissolution, and that's why many attack what they cannot understand. The aura of someone who has already integrated with the self carries a frequency that the collective unconscious recognizes as a threat, the threat of change. And the ego hates change. It wants control, predictability, power. Thus, when your clarity reveals what the other tries to hide, the defense is activated. Sarcasm, criticism, distancing. You start being called cold, insensitive, or too mysterious. But the truth is that your energy only shows what was already there. The problem is that few are ready to see themselves. Therefore, spiritual awakening requires courage, the courage to continue being who you are, even when it disrupts those who still live in lies. True clarity doesn't shout, it illuminates. And illuminating is an act of service. When your presence makes another person feel uncomfortable, you are fulfilling an important psychological role, provoking the birth of consciousness. This is the silent mission of those who walk the path of individuation. to sustain the light without turning it into a weapon, to be a beacon, not a spotlight. To maintain this balance, practice neutral observation. See, feel, but don't judge. Meditate on your reactions. Perceive where your ego still seeks validation and where your self has already learned to simply be. This distinction keeps authenticity alive because clarity is not achieved through speeches, but through coherence. And when the world tries to label you for being different, remember it is not you who destabilizes the ego of others. It is the reflection of the truth you carry. And this light will inevitably begin to expose the most subtle illusions, including in relationships that seemed most secure. Not every connection is meant to last. Some exist only to remind us of who we are and then leave. Carl Jung said that when two souls meet, something greater than them is set in motion: unconscious forces, projections, shadows. The intensity of these connections is not accidental. It is the collective unconscious fulfilling its role as a mirror. When you live authentically, your aura begins to reflect what the other person tries to hide. That's why certain people approach as if they've found a safe haven and then disappear. They feel that something in you sees them with too much clarity, and this feeling is liberating and frightening at the same time. It's the paradox of spirituality. The more genuine the connection, the more courage it demands, and not everyone is ready to be seen in their entirety. Some prefer the comfort of illusion to facing the reflection of the self, and it is at this point that relationships transform into mirrors that both heal and hurt. The pain of this distance is real. It's difficult to understand why someone who seemed so close suddenly distances themselves without explanation. But Jung taught that the awakening of consciousness can be perceived as a threat by those who still live within the boundaries of the ego. Their presence activates memories, triggers, and repressed emotions in the other. It's as if the soul were saying, "Now it's time to look inward." And not everyone can bear this call, so they flee. But this flight is not contempt, it's self-protection. It's the mind trying to silence the soul. When someone distances themselves from you for no apparent reason, remember, your authenticity may have touched a point that the other person is not yet ready to heal. The connection wasn't lost, it just needed to dissolve in order not to be destroyed. This is the paradox of conscious love. It awakens, but it also reveals what is still dormant. And sometimes to truly love is to allow the other to go without ceasing to see them with compassion. Therefore, learn to see separation not as rejection, but as part of the flow of individuation. Spiritual life is not about keeping everyone around you, but about remaining whole when others leave. Take care of your aura as you would a garden. Water it with presence, but don't force flowers to stay. When someone leaves, silently give thanks for what was revealed. Because every authentic relationship leaves something: a mirror, a lesson, a trace of soul. Use this energy to delve even deeper into yourself. Write about what you felt, observe what was activated, transform grief into learning. Jung said that every loss carries the seed of a new consciousness. And it is precisely when you accept separation without closing your heart that the light of the self expands. For only those who have learned not to lose themselves in departures can sustain the next phase. The silent sovereignty of those who no longer need to be understood to remain at peace. There is a type of power that doesn't need to assert itself. It doesn't come from titles or loud voices, but from a presence that doesn't bend. Carl Jung called this integration, when the self ceases to be a distant idea and begins to guide the body, mind, and soul in harmony. This unity creates an unmistakable aura, a silent force that alters the surrounding field without saying a word. It is the power of authenticity, and it has an inevitable consequence. It disturbs those who live by appearances. People accustomed to dominating lose their balance in the face of those who don't react to the game. The ego of others feels disarmed because the sovereign presence doesn't need to compete. It simply is. And the more someone is centered on their own axis, the more the control structures around them weaken. This is true spirituality in action, not an ethereal ideal, but the psychic maturity of someone who has already recognized their own shadow and therefore does not submit to the shadow of others. Silent sovereignty manifests itself in small things, in the calmness of those who do not respond to provocation, in the gaze that does not seek approval, in the smile that does not plead for belonging. It is a force that comes from individuation, from the recognition that value does not depend on applause, but on internal coherence. Jung said that those who are faithful to their own self inevitably challenge systems that feed on blind obedience. Therefore, those who carry this energy tend to provoke strong reactions, deep respect in some, resentment in others. It's natural. Authentic presence threatens any hierarchy built on fear. It's like a flame that exposes the darkness without needing to burn it. And to keep this flame alive, spiritual discipline is necessary, taking care of one's own energy, observing intentions, and never confusing humility with submission. The true sage does not impose himself, but neither does he bend. He simply sustains the center, and the center is power. To be sovereign in silence is to understand that external control is merely an illusion of the ego. True mastery is internal. When you are aligned with your essence, no manipulation can reach you because your aura responds before words. This is the language of the collective unconscious. Vibration recognizes vibration. Fragmented people will try to decipher your mystery. Insecure leaders will try to measure you, but none of them will be able to touch what they do not understand. You don't need to prove anything. Your calmness already proves everything. Jung said that spiritual maturity is when the individual stops reacting and starts responding. And that is exactly what silent sovereignty represents, the transition from instinct to consciousness. It is the point where the self governs and the ego serves. And when this harmony is achieved, something rare emerges, true inner freedom, the basis for the final stage of this journey, where solitude ceases to be absence and transforms into purpose. There is a moment in the spiritual journey when silence becomes a companion. It is not the empty silence of common solitude, but the silence filled with the awakened soul. Carl Jung said that individuation is a process that separates the individual from the herd, not out of pride, but out of destiny. When someone awakens to their own self, they realize they no longer fit into old conversations, shallow relationships, or the places where they once sought refuge. It's as if the world has shrunk in size while consciousness has grown. The aura changes frequency, and with that the environment reacts. Some distance themselves, others observe from afar, few approach. It is in this journey that the awakened being discovers a paradox. The more connected to the whole, the more solitary they become on the human plane, because most still cannot bear the truth that you now naturally uphold. And it is here that spirituality ceases to be a concept and becomes a test, that of remaining true to oneself even when the path narrows. This solitude is in fact the womb of transformation. It is there that the collective unconscious begins to teach you directly, without intermediaries. Jung called this inner dialogue, the encounter between the ego and the self. When the external noise falls silent, the soul finally speaks. And what it says is not always sweet. It shows you what still hurts, what still resists, what it still fears. But it also reveals the vastness of what has always been within you. It is in this state that many feel like giving up, confused by not being understood, exhausted from carrying truths that few see. But true awakening is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage to walk without applause and faith to trust in the invisible. The solitude of the awakened is the retreat of the spirit into itself, and each moment of it prepares for the return, a lighter, more conscious, more whole return. And when this return happens, something changes irreversibly. You no longer seek acceptance, you seek truth. You no longer seek company, you seek presence. You no longer strive to fit in, you learn to belong to yourself. It is at this point that the self establishes itself as the center, and the aura becomes a beacon for others who are also beginning to awaken. Loneliness becomes purpose, pain becomes wisdom, isolation becomes freedom. And then you understand, you were never alone. You were simply called before. Carl Jung said that whoever looks outside dreams, whoever looks inside awakens, and this is the essence of the last stage of individuation. It is when the individual stops seeking the meaning of life and begins to live it in every breath, in every simple act, in every moment of silence. The awakened one is not separate from the world. They are the mirror that the world fears but needs. And it is precisely this reflection that opens the way for collective awakening, the beginning of everything that will come after. Now you understand why some people avoid you for no reason. It's not about being rejected. It's about the effect that truth has on those who still live on appearances. Carl Jung said that the collective unconscious reacts to the presence of those who have already seen themselves from the inside. And that's what you represent. A living reminder of everything the other person hasn't yet faced. Therefore, don't apologize for being intense, profound, or different. Your authenticity is your spiritual calling. The world doesn't need more agreeable people. It needs real people, people with awakened auras, vibrant courage, and peaceful souls. And if that scares people, it's because the truth always scares before it liberates. But remember, awakening is not the end. It is the beginning of a new way of existing. Now that you know the power of your presence, use it wisely. Sustain calm where there is chaos, empathy where there is fear, clarity where there is illusion. Transform the discomfort you cause into light for those who are ready. And when the silence seems too heavy, remember, even the solitude of the awakened is sacred, because it is in it that the self speaks loudest. Your aura is not a burden, it is a mission, and every glance you avert is just another mirror that has not yet learned to reflect what you already are. So tell me, what does your presence awaken in people? The fear of change or the courage to be true to themselves? Write in the comments. I want to know what this video provoked in you, and if something in your words ignited a flame, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Here, with each encounter, we delve deeper into the shadow, into spirituality, and into consciousness. Because awakening doesn't happen all at once. It happens every time you choose not to fade away.